March 7th, 1945. The sky above Germany was a graveyard waiting to happen. Our B-17, Glory Bell, had taken a hit to the left engine. Smoke billowed from the wing as flak tore through the sky like metal bees. I remember gripping the yoke, sweat pooling under my helmet, the world spinning outside the cockpit glass. My name was James Callahan, Captain, 24th Bomber Squadron, United States Army Air Forces. I was 27 years old, and I'd flown 17 missions over enemy lines. This was my 18th, and it would be my last. "Hold it steady, Jimmy," my co-pilot screamed. "I'm trying," I shouted back, though even I didn't believe it anymore. There was a strange peace in that moment, like the world had slowed to a whisper. The flares, the radio static, the cries from the rear gunners, all of it faded, and then I did something I hadn't done in years. I prayed, "God, I don't want to die, but if I must, take me home. Just don't let it be empty." The next second, everything went white. No pain, no impact, just light. I expected angels, trumpets, maybe even judgment, but what I got was silence, floating. Then, a cry, a baby's cry. I was born again on June 14th, 1991, at Mercy General Hospital in Grand Rapids, Michigan. They named me Eli Thomas. The nurses said I was calm, too calm, like I had seen something already. I didn't cry much, didn't fuss, but deep inside, I remembered. Not fully, not clearly, just flashes. The engine roaring, the cold metal, the fear, the verse stitched in my flight jacket. "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Exodus 14. As I grew, the memories grew with me. At age 3, I drew a bomber plane on the wall in crayon. At 5, I told my mom I liked the name Callahan. At 6, I had night terrors, screaming about fire in the sky, about Glory Bell falling. My parents thought it was imagination, but I knew I had been someone else. At 13, it all came rushing back. On a school field trip to the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, we passed a black and white photo of a bomber crew. Squadron 24, 1945. There in the back row, my face, my eyes, my smirk. The caption read, "Captain James Callahan, KIA over Germany, 1945. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. My teacher called my name twice before I snapped out of it. I walked up to the glass case, pressed my hand against it, and whispered, "I remember." That night, I had the dream again. Only this time, it ended differently. I was in the cockpit, everything burning. And just before we crashed, a hand touched my shoulder. I turned, and it was him. Jesus, radiant, calm, smiling. He whispered, "You still have work to do." By the time I turned 17, I had stopped telling people about the dreams. They never went away, just got quieter during the day and louder at night. I'd see flares lighting up the sky, feel the vibration of engines in my bones, and always, I didn't know her name, but I knew her smile, her brown hair always pinned up, the curve of her handwriting on letters I remembered reading, though I never remembered the words, only how they made me feel, like home. One morning, I woke up at 3:12 a.m., heart pounding, chest tight. I had dreamed of the crash again, but this time, just before the light swallowed me, she was there, leaning over me, whispering something, one word. I wrote it down, stared at it for an hour. The name felt ancient and mine, like a ghost still waiting to be heard. I spent the next month in the library after school, not for homework, for the archives. I searched every record I could find from the 1940s, military correspondences, census data, old yearbooks. I didn't know what I was looking for, only that I would know it when I found it. One day I typed Clara, World War II, Michigan. It narrowed down to 6 names. I clicked one, Clara Wainwright, born 1922, lived in Lansing, worked at a telegram office during the war, never married, died in 2007, no children, buried in Maplewood Cemetery. I stared at the screen. Something inside me cracked open. I whispered, "Clara," and for the first time in years, I wept. The next Saturday, I borrowed my father's car and drove 2 hours to Lansing. The cemetery was quiet. Birds, wind, no people. I walked for 20 minutes before I found her. A simple grave, no flowers, just Clara Wainwright, 1922, 2000 waiting. I dropped to my knees. My chest heaved with something I didn't have a name for. Grief? Love? Remorse? All of it? I pulled the old index card from my pocket, the one I'd written at 13. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Exodus 14:14. It was the verse that had been stitched inside my flight jacket as James. I placed it on the grave and whispered, "I'm sorry I never made it back." As I stood, the wind picked up. Not harsh, soft like a breath. And in it, or maybe beside it, I heard her. "You did." That night, I didn't dream of fire. I dreamed of her smile and the feeling of coming home. I thought after I found Clara, the dreams would stop, but they didn't. In fact, they grew sharper, more vivid, like God had unlocked the next reel in a film that had been paused too long. It started with a name I hadn't thought of in years. Donnie. In the dream, I saw his face. Freckles, a chipped front tooth, that stupid grin he always gave me before takeoff. He was my tail gunner. He was just 20, and he died because of me. I woke up gasping, my hands shaking. It wasn't just a dream. It was memory. In the days that followed, it came back in fragments. We were scheduled to fly together on March 7th, 1945. But Donnie had a cold, a bad one. I told him to stay back, rest, but he refused. "If you're going, I'm going, Cap." He took the flight anyway, and when we went down, he didn't make it either. But something in the dream, something I had never remembered before, haunted me. Just before the crash, I had panicked. I was injured, blinded by blood. Donnie was behind me, shouting. Then, side I remember now, he had reached for me, unbuckled himself, tried to pull me free, and in doing so, he stayed behind. I didn't just die that day. He died saving me. And now, decades later, I was back. And he wasn't. I couldn't shake it. I had to find him. Or at least his family. That weekend, I returned to the same library where I'd found Clara. Typed Donald, B17, March 7th, 1945. It took hours. But then, there it was. Donald Everett Price. Born 1925, killed in action, March 7th, 1945, buried in Kansas. Mother, Jeanette Price, father, Samuel. One younger sister, Grace Price, born 1931. I stared at the name, Grace. She'd be in her 90s now if she was even still alive. But something inside me, not memory, not logic, conviction, told me, you have to go. 3 days later, I was on a bus heading west. Not knowing what I'd say, not knowing if she'd believe me, only knowing that this wasn't just about peace. It was about honor. It was about telling the truth, even if it sounded impossible. Because sometimes the truth is too big to stay buried in time. Kansas was flatter than any place I'd ever seen. I rode the bus through miles of wheat fields, old barns, broken fences. I watched the horizon blur in gold and gray, the sky so big it made me feel small. My hands sweated the entire way. I kept the scrap of paper with Grace Price's address in my pocket, smoothing the edges until they nearly tore. I rehearsed what I would say, over and over. Would she even open the door? Would she slam it in my face? How do you tell someone you remember dying as her brother? But something in my heart, or maybe my soul, pressed me forward. Grace Price lived in a small white house on the edge of a quiet street. There were wildflowers and old tomato cans on the porch. Wind chimes tinkled in the hot Kansas breeze. I walked up the steps and hesitated. Then I knocked. It took a while, but the door opened. A thin woman, maybe in her early 90s, stood there. Her hair was silver, pulled back in a neat bun. Her eyes were sharp, blue as prairie sky. She looked me up and down. "Can I help you, son?" For a moment, I almost ran, but I said, "I hope so." "My name is Eli Thomas. I need to talk to you about your brother." "Donald," she blinked, surprised. "Donnie? You're far too young to have known him. My heart pounded. You're right, but may I sit, please? She considered. Then, maybe from curiosity, maybe from loneliness, she let me in. Her house was filled with old photographs, people in uniforms, graduation caps, a black and white dog. A battered flag in a triangle frame sat on the mantel. We sat at the kitchen table. She poured tea with shaking hands. So, Mr. Thomas, what brings you all this way about my Donnie? I stared at the mug, then at her. I know this will sound strange, maybe even crazy, but I have memories that aren't mine, of Donnie, of March 7th, 1945, of a B-17 named Glory Bell. Her hands paused midair. She searched my face. I went on, I remember you as a child, standing in the yard with a yellow ribbon in your hair. I remember Donnie calling you Gracie Girl. I remember the day he left, how you hid his lucky penny in his jacket pocket. Her mouth opened, just a little. No one but Donnie ever called her that. No one but Donnie ever knew about the penny. Tears filled her eyes. How? I tried to smile. My voice was small. I don't know. All I know is before he died, he saved a life, mine. I was his captain. My name was James Callahan. She gasped, hand to her mouth. That name Donnie wrote about you in his letters. He looked up to you. My own eyes stung. He died because of me, Grace. He tried to save me. She shook her head fiercely, eyes fierce through the tears. No, Donnie always said he'd give everything for the crew. He wanted to make a difference. I reached into my pocket and handed her a crumpled photograph. The crew of Glory Bell. Donnie smiling, his arm around me. James. Grace stared at the photo, then at me. Finally, she whispered, "Your eyes, they're just like his." We sat in silence, two souls, a lifetime apart, but somehow never truly separated. When I left her house, Grace hugged me tight, like a mother, like a sister, like someone who'd waited years for this impossible, miraculous closure. She pressed the photo to her heart and said, "You tell him wherever he is, I never forgot, and I'm not afraid anymore." That night, in my hotel room, I dreamed again. This time, Donnie stood beside me. Young, grinning, he said, "Thank you, Cap. Now go live your second chance." I woke with tears, but this time they were warm, cleansing. And for the first time since I was reborn, I felt peace. Months passed since I saw Grace. The air grew colder, the nights quieter, but something in me had changed. Not the memories, they still came, but the weight of them. I didn't carry them like scars anymore. Now, they felt like seeds, waiting to be planted. I returned home and applied for the local Veterans Youth Program, not as a soldier, but as a storyteller. I told the stories of men long gone, men like Donnie, men like the others on Glory Bell. Their photos hung on school walls now, their letters read out loud in gymnasiums, their lives no longer forgotten. One afternoon, a boy approached me after a school talk. He couldn't have been more than 13. He had tears in his eyes and said, "My great-grandpa was in World War II. We never talk about it, but tonight I'm going to ask him." That's when I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. I never stopped having dreams, but they weren't violent anymore. They were memories, warm, strange, familiar, and sometimes, in the silence of early morning, I'd hear a whisper, "You still have work to do." I started writing everything down. Not just the war, not just Clara, not just Donnie, but the second life, the after, the why. I once thought God brought me back to relive what I lost, but I was wrong. He brought me back to redeem what was left undone, to heal, to tell, to love, and to remind others that no story ends in the grave, not when it's written by the author of life. In the front of my journal, I wrote a single verse. "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." Jeremiah 1:5. That verse followed me like a shadow, because it was never about remembering who I was. It was about becoming who I was always meant to be. I am Eli Thomas, but once I was James Callahan. Both lives mattered. But this one, this second chance, this is where the story really begins. If this story touched your heart and you want to hear more powerful stories of faith, healing, and hope, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next journey we share together. I truly believe God is still working miracles every day, and maybe the next story we tell could be yours.